My daughter dumped her baby on my porch to party. I raised him on a pension. 24 years later, he's a tech tycoon. Today, she stormed in with lawyers demanding her share. My grandson stepped between us, looked her dead in the eye, and said 3 words. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The rain was coming down harder than it had all week, and I remember thinking how fitting that was. October 15th, 1999. A Friday night that should have been quiet, should have been peaceful. I was 46 years old, recently widowed, trying to figure out how to live on $850 a month from my late husband's pension. The last thing I expected was to find a baby on my front porch. But there he was. I'd gotten up to check the door because I thought I heard crying over the storm. At first, I assumed it was a cat. We had strays in the neighborhood. When I opened that heavy wooden door, the cold October air hit me like a slap. And there, tucked into a car seat that had seen better days, was the tiniest human being I'd ever laid eyes on. He couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. His little face was scrunched up, red from crying, and he was wrapped in a blue blanket that looked like it came from the hospital. Beside the car seat was a diaper bag and an envelope with my name written on it in handwriting I recognized immediately. Nalani. My daughter. My hands were shaking as I picked up that envelope. The baby had stopped crying the moment he felt the warmth from inside the house, and his dark eyes, so much like Nalani's, were staring up at me with a trust I didn't feel I deserved. The note was brief, written on a piece of paper torn from a spiral notebook. Even now, 24 years later, I can recite it word for word. Mom, I can't do this. I need to live my life. His name is Marcus. There's $200 in the bag. Don't try to find me. Nalani. $200. That was what she thought it would cost to raise her son. I stood there in my doorway, rain soaking my slippers, holding this note while this beautiful baby boy looked up at me with eyes that seemed to say, "Please don't give up on me too." The weight of that moment was crushing. I had barely figured out how to take care of myself after Robert died. My little apartment was cramped, my budget stretched to the breaking point. I was grieving, exhausted, and now I was being asked to take on the responsibility of raising a child at an age when most women my age were thinking about grandchildren who visited on weekends. But as I looked down at Marcus, that's what she'd named him, at least she'd given him that much, I saw something that broke my heart wide open. He looked exactly like Nalani had as a baby. The same dark hair, the same stubborn little chin, the same way of looking at the world like he was trying to figure out if it was safe. Nalani had been 17 when she left home. Not because I threw her out, not because we had some terrible fight, but because she said I was suffocating her. She wanted freedom, adventure, a life bigger than what our little town could offer. I understood that desire, even if it hurt to watch her go. But in the 6 years since she'd left, our relationship had become nothing more than occasional phone calls, where she'd ask for money and I'd send what I could, even when I couldn't really afford it. She'd mentioned being pregnant during one of those calls, maybe 8 or 9 months ago. She'd sounded excited then, talking about the baby's father, a man named Cedric who she said was different from the others. I'd asked if she wanted me to come when the baby was born, if she needed help. She'd laughed and said she had everything under control. Apparently, having everything under control meant dumping her newborn son on my doorstep in the middle of a rainstorm. I brought Marcus inside, car seat and all, and closed the door against the storm. My small living room suddenly felt even smaller with this new presence. The baby was quiet now, just looking around with those alert eyes, taking in his new surroundings. I set the car seat on my coffee table and sat down on my old floral couch, staring at him. What was I supposed to do? I was 46 years old, living on a pension that barely covered my $520 rent and basic utilities. I had no experience with babies. Nalani had been a difficult teenager, but I'd forgotten most of what I knew about caring for infants. I didn't have a crib, didn't have formula, didn't have anything a baby needed. But looking at Marcus, seeing how peacefully he was resting now that he was warm and dry, I felt something I hadn't felt since Robert died. Purpose. This tiny person needed me, not because I was convenient or because there was no one else, but because his mother had chosen me. Even in her selfishness, even in her irresponsibility, Nalani had known that I would take care of him. The $200 she'd left was sitting on my kitchen table, along with a half-empty container of formula and maybe 6 diapers. It wouldn't last the week. But as I watched Marcus sleep in that car seat, his little chest rising and falling with perfect trust, I realized that none of the practical concerns mattered. I couldn't let him go into the system. I couldn't let him wonder why no one had wanted him. I couldn't let him grow up feeling abandoned the way Nalani clearly did, despite all my efforts to show her she was loved. That night, I barely slept. I kept checking on Marcus every hour, terrified that something would happen to him on my watch. I'd made a makeshift bed for him in the bottom drawer of my dresser, lined with soft towels and that blue blanket from the hospital. Every time he stirred, my heart would race. When he cried, I would pick him up and walk around my small apartment, humming songs I half remembered from when Nalani was little. By morning, I had made my decision. I would raise Marcus myself. I would give him the love and stability that Nalani had rejected, the security she'd never seemed to want. I would make sure he knew he was wanted, even if his mother had made it clear he wasn't. I called in sick to my part-time job at the grocery store. I couldn't leave him alone, and I couldn't afford a babysitter. Instead, I bundled him up and walked to the drugstore 6 blocks away, using some of Nalani's $200 to buy more formula and diapers. The woman at the checkout counter smiled at him and asked how old he was. 3 weeks, I said, surprising myself with how naturally the lie came. He's my grandson. It was the first time I'd said it out loud, and it felt right. More right than anything had felt in months. Over the next few days, I developed a routine. Marcus would wake up every 3 hours like clockwork. I'd feed him, change him, walk him around the apartment until he fell asleep again. During his naps, I'd try to catch up on my own rest or figure out how to stretch my budget to accommodate another mouth to feed. I called social services, not to give him up, but to understand what I needed to do legally. The caseworker, a tired woman named Helen, explained that without proper documentation from Nalani, I couldn't officially adopt Marcus. But she also said that as his grandmother, I could petition for guardianship, especially given that his mother had abandoned him. "Does she plan to come back?" Helen asked during her visit to my apartment. I showed her the note. Helen read it twice, shaking her head. "This isn't uncommon," she said gently. "Young mothers who aren't ready for the responsibility. The good news is that you seem more than capable of caring for him. We'll need to do some paperwork, some home visits, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't become his legal guardian." Legal guardian. Not his mother, not his adoptive parent, but his guardian. It felt temporary, like Nalani might come back someday and reclaim him. But I pushed that thought away. Nalani had made her choice. Now I was making mine. The hardest part wasn't the sleepless nights or the financial strain. The hardest part was the silence from Nalani. No phone call to check if I'd found him. No message asking if he was okay. Nothing. It was as if she'd erased both Marcus and me from her life completely. 3 weeks after she'd left him on my doorstep, I was giving Marcus a bottle when the phone rang. My heart leaped. Maybe it was Nalani. Maybe she'd realized her mistake. But it was just a telemarketer trying to sell me life insurance. As I hung up the phone, Marcus looked up at me with those serious dark eyes, and I realized something that would shape every decision I made for the next 24 years. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't some extended babysitting arrangement until Nalani got her life together. This was permanent. Marcus was mine now, as surely as if I'd given birth to him myself. And I would protect him from ever feeling unwanted again, no matter what it cost me. The years blurred together in a haze of feeding schedules, diaper changes, and sleepless nights that turned into sleepless years. By the time Marcus was walking, 13 months old, earlier than most babies, I had gotten used to living on 3 hours of sleep and surviving on instant coffee and determination. Money was always tight. My pension of $850 had to stretch to cover everything: rent, utilities, food for 2, diapers, formula, and eventually clothes as Marcus grew out of everything faster than I could buy replacements. I learned to shop at thrift stores, to clip coupons like my life depended on it, to make meals out of whatever was on sale at the grocery store where I still worked 20 hours a week. Marcus was an easy baby in many ways. He rarely cried without reason, slept through the night by 6 months, and had this way of looking at me that made every sacrifice worth it. But easy or not, raising a child alone in your late 40s while living on a fixed income was exhausting in ways I hadn't imagined. I remember the first time he got sick, a fever that spiked to 102 degrees when he was 8 months old. I didn't have a car, couldn't afford the taxi to the emergency room, so I wrapped him in blankets and walked 16 blocks to the hospital at 2 in the morning. He recovered fine, just a virus, but I'll never forget how helpless I felt carrying him through those empty streets, praying I was doing the right thing. By his 2nd birthday, I had converted my small living room into what looked more like a nursery than an adult space. Toys covered every surface. Children's books filled the shelves where my romance novels used to sit, and the coffee table had foam padding on all the corners. My life had completely reorganized itself around this little boy who called me Gamma, because he couldn't quite manage Grandma yet. That's when Nalani called for the first time since she'd left him. I was giving Marcus lunch, mashed bananas and crackers that he was enthusiastically spreading across his high-chair tray, when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer it because unknown numbers usually meant bill collectors or telemarketers. But something made me pick up. Mom? The voice was older, different somehow, but unmistakably Nalani's. My heart stopped. Nalani. I looked at Marcus, who was watching me with curious eyes, banana smeared across his cheek. Where are you? I'm in California, Los Angeles. I'm doing really well, Mom. I'm in a band now, and we're about to get signed to a record label. 2 years. She'd been gone for 2 years, and she was calling to tell me about her band. Do you want to know how your son is doing? The words came out sharper than I intended. There was a pause. How is he? His name is Marcus. He's 2 years old. He's smart and funny, and he calls me Gamma because he doesn't know he has a mother who walked away from him. Mom, don't be like that. I knew he'd be fine with you. You're so good with kids. I was so good with kids. As if raising her grandson was just another one of my natural talents, like making pie or remembering birthdays. What do you want, Nalani? I was hoping. Things are a little tight right now. The band is between gigs and I'm having trouble making rent. Could you maybe send me a couple $100? Just until we get back on our feet. I looked at Marcus, who had finished his lunch and was reaching for me with sticky hands. $200. The same amount she'd left with him when she abandoned him. No. What? I said no. I'm raising your son on $850 a month, Nalani. I don't have any money to send you so you can chase your dreams in California. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had that edge I remembered from her teenage years. Fine, I get it. You're punishing me for leaving. I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting him. And myself. Whatever, Mom. I thought you'd want to help your daughter, but I guess I was wrong. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, watching Marcus try to climb out of his high chair, and realized that I wasn't sad. I was angry. Angry that she thought she could call me after 2 years and ask for money without even asking about her son's first words, his first steps, his favorite book, or the fact that he had her smile and her stubborn streak. Marcus looked at me and said, "Gamma up," with his arms stretched toward me. I lifted him out of the chair and held him close, breathing in that sweet baby smell that was already starting to fade as he grew into a toddler. The calls continued sporadically over the years. Sometimes 6 months would pass, sometimes a year, but Nalani would always resurface when she needed money. The band in Los Angeles fell apart. She moved to Portland with a boyfriend who turned out to be married. She tried college again but dropped out after 1 semester. She worked as a waitress, a receptionist, a dog walker. Each phone call brought a new story, a new crisis, a new reason why she needed financial help. And each time I said no. By the time Marcus was 5 and starting kindergarten, I had learned to dread the phone calls. Not because I missed Nalani, though part of me did, but because they upset the careful balance Marcus and I had created. After each call, he would ask questions I didn't know how to answer. Gamma, who was that on the phone? Just someone I used to know, sweetheart. Why did you look sad after? How do you explain to a 5-year-old that his mother calls to ask for money but never asks about him? How do you tell a child that the woman who gave birth to him has never once asked to speak to him, never sent a birthday card, never wondered if he was happy or healthy or safe? I chose not to tell him. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe I should have been honest from the beginning, but I couldn't bear the thought of Marcus feeling rejected the way I had felt rejected by Nalani's choices. Instead, I told him that his mother had been very young when he was born and wasn't ready to be a parent, but that she loved him very much and wanted him to be happy. I told him that sometimes adults had to make difficult decisions, and that his mother had decided the best thing for him was to live with me. It wasn't entirely a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Marcus seemed to accept this explanation, the way children accept most things adults tell them. He focused on his life with me, school, friends, the cat we adopted from the shelter when he was 6. He was a good student, curious and eager to learn, always asking questions about everything from why the sky was blue to how televisions worked. Money remained a constant worry. I supplemented my pension with part-time work when I could find it. Cleaning houses, babysitting for neighbors, seasonal work at the department store during Christmas. Marcus learned early that money was tight, that we couldn't buy everything he wanted, but he never complained. When other kids got new bikes for their birthdays, Marcus was happy with books from the library. When they went to Disney World for vacation, Marcus was content with day trips to the lake. The hardest conversation we ever had was when he was 8 and asked me directly about his father. We were sitting at our small kitchen table, and Marcus was working on a school project about family trees. He had drawn me at the top, then himself below, but there were empty branches where other families had mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles, Cousins. Gamma, where's my dad? I had rehearsed this conversation in my head for years, but I still wasn't prepared for the direct way he asked it. Your father wasn't able to be part of your life, sweetheart. Sometimes that happens with grown-ups. Is he dead like Grandpa Robert? No, he's not dead. He made different choices. Marcus nodded seriously, the way he did when he was processing something difficult. Do you think he knows about me? I think he probably does. Do you think he's sorry he's not here? That question broke my heart. I think any man would be lucky to have you as his son, Marcus. If he doesn't know that, it's his loss, not yours. Marcus seemed satisfied with that answer and went back to his family tree, carefully drawing hearts around the branch that connected us. But that night, after he was asleep, I found myself crying for the first time in years. Not for myself, not for the sacrifices I'd made, but for this beautiful, brilliant boy who deserved so much more than the hand he'd been dealt. By the time Marcus was 10, our routine was well established. He would come home from school, do his homework at the kitchen table while I prepared dinner. Then we'd watch television together or read books from the library. On weekends, we'd explore the city on the bus, museums, parks, free concerts. We had created our own little world, just the two of us, and it was a good world. But I was getting older. My back ached from years of working physical jobs. My eyes needed stronger glasses that I couldn't afford to replace, and some mornings it took me longer to get moving than it used to. I worried about what would happen if I got sick, if I couldn't work anymore, if something happened to me. I had started keeping a box of important papers under my bed. Marcus's birth certificate, the guardianship documents, my will that left everything to him, which wasn't much, but it was something. I also kept letters in that box. Letters from Nalani that had come with some of the phone calls over the years, usually when she was asking for money, but wanted to seem more personal about it. Marcus didn't know about those letters. In them, Nalani talked about her life like it was some grand adventure, full of exciting people and opportunities. She mentioned Marcus occasionally, usually to ask if he was still doing well, or to say she hoped he would understand when he was older why she had made the choices she did. What she never mentioned was wanting to see him. What she never asked was if she could call and talk to him. What she never said was that she missed him or regretted leaving him. Those letters confirmed what I had suspected from the beginning. Nalani saw Marcus as a chapter of her life that was closed, a mistake that had been corrected when she left him with me. To her, he wasn't a son she was missing. He was a responsibility she had successfully avoided. The last letter had come 6 months ago, when Marcus was 10 and starting 5th grade. Nalani was living in Phoenix then, working at a resort and dating someone new. She mentioned that she was thinking about getting married again and that her boyfriend didn't know about Marcus. I think it's better that way, she had written. Starting fresh, you know? Marcus is happy with you, and you're so much better at the mom thing than I ever was. Maybe someday when he's older we can figure out how to have a relationship. But right now I think it's best if I just let you handle everything. Let me handle everything. As if raising her son was a favor I was doing for her convenience. I had burned that letter after reading it, standing over my kitchen sink watching the paper curl and blacken. But the words stayed with me. And that night I made a decision that I would keep for the next 13 years. I would never tell Marcus about his mother's letters. I would never let him know that she had chosen, again and again, to prioritize her own life over any relationship with him. I would protect him from that knowledge as long as I could. Looking back now, I'm not sure if that was the right choice. But at the time, watching my 10-year-old grandson sleep peacefully in his small bedroom, surrounded by books and model airplanes and drawings he'd made of the two of us. I couldn't bear the thought of telling him that his mother was out there somewhere, living her life as if he had never existed. Some truths, I told myself, were too heavy for a child to carry. Marcus was happy. He was thriving. He had never once said he felt like something was missing from his life. But deep down, I knew that someday those carefully hidden truths would find their way to the surface. And when they did, everything we had built together would be tested in ways I couldn't yet imagine. 24 years. That's how long it had been since that rainy October night when everything changed. Marcus was no longer the helpless baby I'd found on my doorstep. He was a man now, 24 years old, with his own apartment downtown and a technology company that seemed to grow bigger every month. I still lived in the same small apartment where I'd raised him, though he'd been trying to convince me to move somewhere nicer for the past 2 years. The rent was still $520, which felt like a bargain now compared to what everything else cost, but the building had gotten older along with me. The stairs creaked more than they used to, the heating was unreliable, and my neighbors had changed from families to college students who played music too loud and left trash in the hallways. But this apartment held 24 years of memories. The height marks on the doorframe where I'd measured Marcus every birthday. The small burn on the kitchen counter from the time he tried to make me breakfast when he was 12 and forgot about the pan on the stove. The living room where we'd spent countless evenings doing homework together, where I'd taught him to play chess, where we'd watched his favorite movies until I could recite them by heart. Marcus visited every Sunday without fail. It had been our tradition since he was small. Sunday dinner together, just the two of us. Even now, with his busy schedule and growing company, he never missed a Sunday. He would arrive around 4 in the afternoon with groceries he'd picked up, ingredients for whatever meal we'd planned to cook together that week. Today was different, though. I could see it in his face the moment he walked through the door. He looked troubled, distracted in a way that was unusual for him. Marcus had always been focused, determined, even as a child. When he set his mind to something, he pursued it with single-minded intensity. It's what had made him such a good student, and later, such a successful entrepreneur. Gamma, he said, setting the grocery bags on my kitchen counter. At 24, he still called me Gamma, though it had evolved from the baby nickname into something more intentional, more affectionate. We need to talk about something. My heart clenched. Those words, we need to talk, had never led to anything good in my experience. What's wrong? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Marcus ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture I recognized from his childhood. He did that when he was nervous or trying to work through a problem. I got a call yesterday from a law firm in Phoenix. Phoenix. The word hit me like a physical blow. The last letter I'd received from Nalani, the one I'd burned 6 months ago, had come from Phoenix. What kind of call? Marcus pulled out one of my kitchen chairs and sat down heavily. They said they represent my mother, my biological mother. He looked up at me and I could see the confusion in his dark eyes. They said she wants to meet me. I felt the blood drain from my face. For 24 years, I had dreaded this moment. I had known it would come eventually, but I had hoped, foolishly, selfishly, that it would be later, much later. Maybe after I was gone, so I wouldn't have to watch Nalani waltz back into Marcus's life after I had done all the hard work of raising him. What did you tell them? I managed to ask. I told them I needed time to think about it. I wanted to talk to you first. Marcus reached across the table and took my hand. His hands were strong now, calloused from the weekend projects he worked on to relax from his high-stress job. Gamma, you've never really told me why she left. I mean, I know she was young and not ready to be a parent, but why has she never tried to contact me? Why now? The questions I had been avoiding for more than 2 decades hung in the air between us. I looked at Marcus, this wonderful man I had raised, this success I was so proud of, and felt the weight of all the truths I had kept from him. It's complicated, sweetheart, I said, falling back on the same vague response I'd been giving him since he was old enough to ask. I'm 24 years old, Gamma. I think I can handle complicated. He was right, of course, but handling the truth and being hurt by it were 2 different things. I had spent his entire life protecting him from the knowledge that his mother had chosen, repeatedly and deliberately, to stay out of his life. Not because she couldn't find him, not because circumstances had kept them apart, but because she had never wanted the responsibility of being his mother. The lawyers mentioned something else, Marcus continued, and I could hear the careful way he was choosing his words. They said my mother has been keeping track of my success, that she's proud of what I've accomplished. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Proud. Marcus's eyes sharpened. What does that mean? I stood up abruptly, needing to move, needing to do something with my hands. I walked to the sink and began washing the dishes that were already clean, scrubbing at a plate that didn't need scrubbing. Gamma, talk to me. Please. The desperation in his voice broke something inside me. This was Marcus, the boy I had raised, the man who had never asked me for anything except love and guidance. He deserved answers, even if those answers would hurt him. I turned around, drying my hands on a dish towel that had seen better days. She's been keeping track of you, Marcus, but not in the way you think. What do you mean? I walked back to the table but didn't sit down. I couldn't sit still, not for this conversation. Your mother has called me over the years. Not often, but sometimes. Usually when she needed money. Marcus's expression shifted, and I could see him processing this information. She's never once asked to speak to you. She's never asked how you were doing in school, whether you were happy, what your interests were. She's never sent a birthday card or a Christmas present or even a photograph. The hurt that flashed across Marcus's face made me want to take the words back, but it was too late. The truth was out there now, hanging between us like a living thing. She called you for money, he said slowly, and you never told me. I was protecting you. From what? From knowing that my mother was alive and chose not to be part of my life? The anger in his voice was something I had rarely heard from him. Even as a teenager, Marcus had been remarkably even-tempered. He got frustrated sometimes, disappointed when things didn't go according to plan, but I could count on one hand the number of times I had seen him truly angry. From knowing that you weren't important enough to her to sacrifice anything for, I said quietly. From knowing that while I was working 3 jobs to buy your school supplies, she was asking me to send her money so she could pursue her dreams. From knowing that the reason she's contacting you now isn't because she misses you or regrets leaving you, but because you've become successful enough to be worth her attention. Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. You should have told me. When? When you were 5 and asked about your father? When you were 10 and drew family trees for school? When you were 16 and all your friends were complaining about their parents and you told me how lucky you felt to have me? I could feel tears building behind my eyes. When was I supposed to tell you that your mother views you as a mistake she corrected by dumping you on my doorstep? That's not fair. None of this is fair, Marcus. It wasn't fair that she left you. It wasn't fair that I had to choose between my retirement and your childhood. It wasn't fair that you grew up without parents your own age. without siblings, without the kind of family most kids have. I took a shaky breath. But we made it work anyway. We built something good together, didn't we? Marcus stopped pacing and looked at me, and I could see the war happening behind his eyes. The man who loved me and was grateful for everything I had done for him, versus the son who was hurt and angry about being lied to, even if those lies had been meant to protect him. Yes, he said finally. We did build something good, but Gamma, those were my choices to make. My decisions about whether I wanted a relationship with her or not. You took that away from me. He was right. I knew he was right. But knowing it and accepting it were two different things. I know, I whispered. I know I should have told you. I couldn't bear to see you hurt by her again. Again? I closed my eyes. Another truth I had kept from him. She hurt you when she left you, Marcus. You were so small, but you cried for days. You kept looking toward the door, like you were waiting for someone. It took weeks before you stopped startling every time you heard footsteps in the hallway. You were just a baby, but somehow you knew you'd been abandoned. The silence stretched between us, heavy with years of unspoken truths and carefully constructed protections. Finally, Marcus sat back down across from me. When he spoke, his voice was gentler but still strained. The lawyers said she wants to arrange a meeting. They didn't say why exactly, just that she feels it's time we had a relationship. He looked directly at me. They also mentioned that she knows about my company's value, about my financial situation. There it was. The piece of information that confirmed my worst suspicions about why Nalani had chosen this moment to resurface. What are you going to do? I asked. Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring down at his hands. When he looked up, his expression was resolute, but sad. I'm going to meet with her. I need to know who she is, what she wants, why she left. He paused. I need to know for myself, not just what you've told me to protect me. I nodded, though my heart was breaking. Okay. Will you be angry if I do? The question surprised me. After everything, after the hurt and the accusations and the revelations, he was still worried about disappointing me. Oh, sweetheart, no. I could never be angry at you for wanting to know your mother. I'm scared for you because I don't trust her motives, but I'm not angry. Marcus reached across the table and took my hand again. Whatever happens, whatever she wants or doesn't want, you're still my Gamma. You're still the person who raised me, who believed in me, who sacrificed for me. That doesn't change. I squeezed his hand, trying to memorize the feeling of it. Because I had a terrible suspicion that everything was about to change, whether we wanted it to or not. When is the meeting? Next week. She's flying in from Phoenix. Phoenix. Of course she was coming here, to our territory, to the life we had built without her. She would walk into the world that Marcus and I had created together, and I had no idea what she would try to take from it. Marcus, I said carefully, there's something else you should know. Something about the legal situation. His expression grew wary. What do you mean? When she left you, I became your legal guardian, not your adoptive mother. That was all I could afford at the time, and it seemed like enough. I took a deep breath. But it means that technically, legally, she's still your mother. She still has certain rights. I watched the implications of this hit him. The color drained slightly from his face. What kind of rights? I don't know exactly. I've never looked into it because I never thought. I trailed off, then forced myself to continue. I never thought she'd come back. But Marcus, Successful people sometimes become targets. If she's been following your career, if she knows about your company's value, you think she's coming back for money. I think your mother has never done anything in her life that wasn't ultimately about what benefited her. And right now, having a relationship with a successful son would benefit her considerably. Marcus stood up again, but this time his movement was slower, more thoughtful. I still need to meet with her, Gamma. I need to look her in the eye and hear what she has to say. I know you do, but I'll be careful. I'll keep in mind everything you've told me. As he gathered up the groceries we had never used for our Sunday dinner, I felt a chill settle over me that had nothing to do with the October weather. This apartment, this life, this relationship that had sustained both of us for 24 years, all of it felt suddenly fragile, like something that could be destroyed by a single conversation with a woman who had never earned the right to call herself Marcus's mother. After he left, I sat alone in my kitchen staring at the phone. Part of me wanted to call him back, to beg him not to meet with her, to stay safe in the world we had created together. But I knew I had lost the right to make that choice for him the moment I had decided to keep her letters secret. Outside my window, the October light was fading into dusk. 24 years ago, on a night just like this one, Nalani had left her son on my doorstep and disappeared. Now she was coming back, and I had the terrible feeling that this time, she might take him with her. The meeting was supposed to happen at a downtown coffee shop, neutral territory that Marcus had chosen. I wasn't invited, of course, but I found myself pacing my small apartment that entire Tuesday afternoon, checking my phone every few minutes to see if he had called or texted. When my phone finally rang at 4:15, I grabbed it on the first ring. Gamma. Marcus's voice sounded hollow, drained in a way I'd never heard before. How did it go? There was a long pause. Can you meet me at my office? I need to show you something. The 20-minute bus ride to Marcus's downtown office felt like hours. His company occupied the 15th floor of a glass building that still intimidated me every time I visited. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah who always greeted me warmly, looked concerned as she directed me to Marcus's private office. I found him sitting behind his desk, staring at a stack of papers spread in front of him. He looked older somehow, like the meeting with Nalani had aged him years in the span of a few hours. Marcus? He looked up, and I could see the hurt and confusion in his eyes. Without saying anything, he pushed the papers toward me. Legal documents. That's what they were. And even though the language was formal and confusing, the basic message was clear enough. Nalani wasn't just seeking a relationship with Marcus. She was seeking legal recognition as his mother, and with it, certain financial rights and considerations. I don't understand all of it, Marcus said quietly. But the lawyers she brought with her, yes, lawyers, plural, they explained enough. I sat down heavily in the chair across from his desk, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Tell me what happened. Marcus leaned back in his chair, running both hands through his hair. She looked exactly like I remembered from the few photos you had of her. Older, obviously, but the same face, the same smile. He paused. She hugged me when she saw me, Gamma. She cried and said she'd missed me so much and that leaving me was the hardest thing she'd ever done. Even hearing it secondhand, I could picture it perfectly. Nalani had always been good at emotional manipulation, at saying exactly what people wanted to hear. Then she told me her story. How young and scared she was when I was born. How she knew you would take better care of me than she could. How she spent years regretting her decision but was too ashamed to reach out. Marcus's voice was getting harder, more bitter. She said she's been following my career for years. that she's so proud of what I've accomplished, that she always knew I was destined for great things. And then the lawyers started talking. Marcus picked up one of the documents. Apparently, because she never formally relinquished her parental rights, and because I was never officially adopted, she still has certain legal claims to me as her son. The words hit me like ice water. What kind of claims? Financial ones, mainly. They cited something called filial responsibility laws. Apparently, some states have legal requirements for adult children to support their aging parents if they have the means to do so. I felt sick. She's not aging, Marcus. She's 47 years old. I pointed that out. The lawyers said age wasn't necessarily a factor, that financial hardship was the key issue. Marcus set the paper down with more force than necessary. She's apparently in debt, Gamma. Credit cards, a failed business venture, medical bills from some kind of surgery last year. She's looking at bankruptcy. Of course she was. Nilani had never been responsible with money, even as a teenager. The idea that she would suddenly develop fiscal responsibility in her 40s was laughable, except that nothing about this situation was funny. She wants me to help her, Marcus continued, not as a favor, not as a gift, but as her legal right as my mother. She's prepared to go to court if necessary to establish her parental rights and my financial obligations. Can she do that? According to her lawyers, yes, maybe. The law is apparently complicated, and a lot would depend on which judge we got and how they interpreted the specific circumstances. Marcus stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the city below. But even if she loses, the legal battle could go on for months. It would be expensive, time-consuming, and very public. Very public. That was the real threat, wasn't it? Marcus had worked hard to build his company and his reputation. A messy legal battle with his estranged mother would be exactly the kind of publicity that could damage everything he had accomplished. What did you tell her? Marcus turned back to me, and I could see the anger building behind his careful composure. I told her I needed time to review the documents with my own lawyer. She said that was fine, but that she hoped we could work something out as a family without involving the courts. As a family? The words tasted bitter in my mouth. That's when I asked her about you. Something in his tone made my stomach clench. What about me? I asked her why, if she was so concerned about family relationships, she had never tried to contact you either. Why she had never thanked you for raising her son, never asked how you were doing, never acknowledged what you had sacrificed for me. I held my breath, waiting. She said she figured you were fine, that raising me had probably been fulfilling for you since you never had any other children. She said she assumed you enjoyed having a purpose in your retirement years. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. 24 years of my life, dismissed as a pleasant hobby that had given me something to do in my old age. But then she said something else, Marcus continued, and his voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She said she hoped there wouldn't be any unpleasantness between you and her because she'd hate for our family reunion to cause problems for someone who had been so helpful over the years. She threatened me. Not directly, but the implication was clear. If you caused problems for her, if you tried to interfere with her relationship with me, there might be consequences. I stood up abruptly, anger flooding through me like nothing I had felt since the night she had left Marcus on my doorstep. What kind of consequences? I don't know. I didn't ask for specifics because I wanted to get out of there and talk to you first. Marcus walked back to his desk and gathered up the papers. But Gamma, I need you to know something. Whatever legal rights she thinks she has, whatever claims she wants to make, none of it changes how I feel about you. You're my family. You're the person who raised me, who loved me, who made me who I am today." The fierceness in his voice brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you for saying that. It's not just something I'm saying. It's the truth." Marcus came around the desk and took my hands in his. "But I also need you to know that I'm not going to let her manipulate me, and I'm not going to let her hurt you. Marcus, you don't understand what she's capable of. When she wants something, she doesn't stop. She'll use every emotional trick she knows, every legal loophole she can find. Then we'll fight her." The simple determination in his voice reminded me of the little boy who had once announced he was going to build a rocket ship to take us to the moon. When Marcus set his mind to something, he found a way to make it happen. "It won't be easy," I warned him. "And it won't be cheap. I can afford expensive lawyers, Gamma. That's one advantage of the success she's trying to exploit." Marcus squeezed my hands. "What I can't afford is to let her destroy everything we've built together." Over the next few days, Marcus consulted with 2 different law firms that specialized in family law. The news wasn't good. Nalani's legal position was weaker than her lawyers had implied, but it wasn't non-existent. The fact that she had never formally relinquished her parental rights did give her certain standing, and the complexity of the laws around adult children's financial obligations to their parents meant that even a losing battle could be long and expensive. "The worst part," Marcus told me over dinner at my apartment that Friday, "is that she knows I'll probably settle rather than fight. A public court battle could hurt my company, and she's counting on that." "How much does she want?" Marcus set down his fork and looked at me across my small kitchen table. $200,000 as a starting point for what she calls retroactive child support, the money she claims I owe her for giving birth to me, and then sacrificing her youth by allowing me to be raised in a stable home. The audacity of it was staggering. She wanted Marcus to pay her for the privilege of having been abandoned. "There's more," Marcus continued. "She also wants ongoing monthly payments, $5,000 a month, which she says is reasonable given my income level and her status as my mother. $5,000 a month, $60,000 a year for the rest of Nalani's life, as payment for having given birth to a son she dumped on her mother's doorstep and ignored for 24 years. "You're not seriously considering this," I said. "I'm considering all my options. My lawyers say that even if we fight and win, the legal costs could easily reach $50,000 or more, and that's assuming she doesn't appeal, which she probably would." I could see the calculation happening in his mind, the cold business logic that had made him successful. Pay her what she wanted, or pay lawyers almost as much with no guarantee of victory and the added cost of public embarrassment. "Marcus, if you give her money now, she'll never stop. There will always be another emergency, another expense, another reason why you owe her more." "I know that, Gamma, but I also know that fighting her could cost me everything I've worked for." That's when I realized what I had to do. "There's another option," I said quietly. Marcus looked at me with curiosity and concern. "What do you mean?" I stood up and walked to my bedroom, returning with the small metal box I kept under my bed. The box containing all the important papers from our life together, including the letters I had never shown him. "I've been keeping something from you," I said, setting the box on the table between us. "Something that might change everything." Marcus's expression grew wary. "More secrets?" "Not secrets to protect you this time. Evidence to protect us both." I opened the box and pulled out a folder containing copies of every letter Nalani had sent me over the years. along with records I had kept of every phone call, every request for money, every casual dismissal of Marcus's existence. "She's been in contact with me regularly for 24 years, I said, handing him the folder. "And she's documented, in her own words, exactly what kind of mother she's been." Marcus opened the folder and began reading. I watched his expression change as he worked his way through years of Nalani's own correspondence. Letters where she talked about Marcus like he was a burden she had successfully offloaded. Phone call summaries where she asked for money, but never about her son's welfare. Documentation of a pattern of selfishness and irresponsibility that spanned more than 2 decades. "She wrote all this?" Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. "Every word. She never expected you to see these letters, so she had no reason to lie or pretend to be anything other than what she really is." Marcus read for another few minutes, then closed the folder and looked at me. "Why didn't you ever show me these before?" "Because I thought they would hurt you more than help you. But now," I took a deep breath, "now I think they might be exactly what we need to fight her." Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring down at the folder. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, harder, more resolved. "She's not going to get away with this." "What are you going to do?" Marcus stood up, gathering the folder and the legal documents Nalani's lawyers had given him. "I'm going to call her lawyers and tell them we'll see them in court. And then I'm going to make sure that everyone involved in this case, every judge, every mediator, every court official, knows exactly what kind of person is making these claims." The determination in his voice was absolute, and I felt something I hadn't felt since this whole nightmare began. Hope. "Are you sure, Marcus? Once we start fighting, there's no going back." Marcus looked at me with eyes that reminded me of the little boy who had once promised to protect me from monsters under the bed. "Gamma, you spent 24 years protecting me from her. Now it's my turn to protect you." As he gathered his things to leave, I felt the first stirring of something that might have been relief. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since Nalani had resurfaced, I felt like we might actually have a chance to win. The court hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in November, 6 weeks after Nalani's initial contact with Marcus. Those 6 weeks passed in a blur of legal consultations, document preparation, and a tension that seemed to permeate every aspect of our lives. Marcus had hired one of the city's best family law attorneys, a sharp woman named Rebecca Chen who specialized in cases involving parental rights and financial exploitation. She had reviewed all of Nalani's letters and phone call records with the methodical precision of a surgeon, building what she called an ironclad case against Nalani's claims. "Your grandmother kept meticulous records," Rebecca had told Marcus during one of their meetings that I was allowed to attend. "Most people don't think to document this kind of long-term emotional manipulation, but these letters show a clear pattern of abandonment and exploitation that spans more than 2 decades. But as the hearing date approached, I found myself growing more anxious rather than more confident. I knew Nalani better than anyone else in that courtroom would, and I knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. She had something planned. I could feel it in my bones the way you can feel a storm coming. The night before the hearing, Marcus came to my apartment for what had become our regular strategy session. Rebecca had prepared him for the kinds of questions he might be asked, the arguments Nalani's lawyers were likely to make, and the evidence they would present to counter her claims. "Are you ready for this?" I asked him as we sat at my kitchen table with cups of coffee that had gone cold. Marcus looked tired. The stress of the past 6 weeks had taken a toll on him, and I could see it in the lines around his eyes, the way his shoulders stayed perpetually tense. "I think so. Rebecca says we have a strong case, and the evidence from the letters speaks for itself." "But?" He looked at me sharply. How did you know there was a but? Because I've known you for 24 years, and I can hear it in your voice. Marcus sighed and leaned back in his chair. I keep thinking about what she said that first day, about not wanting this to become unpleasant for you. I'm worried she has something planned, some way to turn this around and make you the bad guy. His concern for me, even in the middle of his own crisis, made my heart ache with love and pride. Marcus, whatever she says about me, whatever lies she tells, it doesn't matter. What matters is that the truth comes out. I know that. But I also know that you're 70 years old, and you shouldn't have to go through this kind of stress because of choices she made when she was 23. I reached across the table and took his hand, noting how much larger it was than mine now, how capable and strong it felt. Sweetheart, I went through 24 years of stress because of choices she made when she was 23. This is just the end of it, finally. The next morning, we arrived at the courthouse early. Rebecca had warned us that Nalani would likely try to create a spectacle, to present herself as a grieving mother who had been kept from her son by a possessive grandmother. She had coached both Marcus and me on how to respond to emotional manipulation, how to stick to the facts even when Nalani tried to make the proceedings about feelings rather than evidence. But nothing could have prepared me for seeing her again after all these years. She looked good. Better than good, actually. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup expertly applied, and she was wearing a conservative blue dress that made her look like someone's respectable suburban mother. The only thing that hadn't changed was her eyes, which still held that calculating quality I remembered from her teenage years. She was surrounded by 3 lawyers, which seemed excessive for what should have been a straightforward hearing. But as Rebecca had warned us, Nalani's legal team was playing for much higher stakes than just financial support. They were trying to establish a precedent that could be used in other cases, and they had apparently invested significantly in making sure their case was as strong as possible. When Nalani saw Marcus, she began crying immediately. Not the quiet tears of genuine emotion, but the loud, dramatic sobbing of someone performing grief for an audience. She reached toward him as if she wanted to embrace him, calling out, "My son, my beautiful son," in a voice that carried across the entire courtroom. Marcus stepped back, his expression carefully neutral. "Hello, Nalani." The use of her first name rather than mother clearly stung, but she recovered quickly, turning to me with what might have looked like a warm smile if you didn't know her as well as I did. "Susan," she said, her voice dripping with false affection. "You look wonderful. Thank you so much for taking such good care of my son all these years." I didn't respond. Rebecca had coached me to keep my interactions with Nalani to an absolute minimum, to avoid giving her any opening to manipulate or provoke me. The hearing began with Nalani's lawyers presenting their case. They painted a picture of a young woman who had made a difficult but loving decision to place her son with a capable relative while she got her life together. They talked about Nalani's years of regret and her desperate desire to reconnect with the son she had never stopped loving. It was a compelling narrative, expertly delivered by lawyers who clearly knew how to work a courtroom. If I hadn't lived through the reality of the past 24 years, I might have been moved by their portrayal of Nalani as a tragic figure who deserved sympathy, rather than condemnation. Then it was Rebecca's turn. She began by reading excerpts from Nalani's own letters, using Nalani's own words to dismantle the story her lawyers had just told. Letter after letter where Nalani referred to Marcus as, "your problem now," where she talked about her relief at not having to deal with all that baby drama, where she asked for money without ever asking about her son's welfare. The effect was devastating. With each letter Rebecca read, I could see the judge's expression growing more skeptical, more disapproving. These weren't the words of a loving mother who had been forced to make a painful sacrifice. These were the words of someone who had viewed her child as an inconvenience to be discarded. But the most damaging evidence came when Rebecca presented phone call records that I had meticulously kept over the years. 24 years of conversations with Nalani, documented with dates, times, and detailed summaries of what had been discussed. "Your Honor," Rebecca said, "in 24 years of contact with the grandmother who was raising her son, the plaintiff asked about Marcus's welfare exactly 0 times. She never asked about his health, his education, his interests, or his emotional well-being. She never asked to speak with him, never requested photographs, never sent birthday gifts or holiday cards." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Even Nalani's lawyers looked uncomfortable as Rebecca continued. What she did ask for, repeatedly and consistently, was money. Financial assistance for herself, with no regard for the financial burden her mother was carrying while raising the child she had abandoned. That's when Nalani's composure finally cracked. "That's not true," she shouted, jumping to her feet despite her lawyer's attempts to restrain her. "I was young and scared and doing the best I could. I knew Marcus was better off with her. She always made me feel like I couldn't do anything right anyway." The outburst was exactly what Rebecca had been hoping for. In a matter of seconds, Nalani had revealed the entitled, self-centered person she had always been, the one who blamed everyone else for her own choices and their consequences. "I loved him," Nalani continued, her voice rising to a pitch that made several people in the courtroom wince. "I loved him enough to give him a better life than I could provide. And now that he's successful, I have a right to benefit from that success. I'm his mother." Marcus stood up slowly, his face pale but his voice steady and strong. "Your Honor, may I respond to that?" The judge nodded, and Marcus turned to face Nalani directly for the first time since entering the courtroom. "You are not my mother," he said quietly, but with such conviction that his words seemed to echo in the silence. "A mother is someone who gets up at 3 in the morning when her child has nightmares. A mother is someone who works 3 jobs to pay for school supplies and birthday parties. A mother is someone who sits in hospital waiting rooms and teaches you to ride a bike and helps you with homework even when she's exhausted." He gestured toward me. "That woman sitting over there is my mother. She earned that title through 24 years of love and sacrifice and dedication. You're just someone who gave birth to me and then walked away." The judge called for a brief recess, during which Nalani's lawyers huddled around her, clearly trying to convince her to control her emotions and stick to their planned strategy. But the damage was done. Her outburst had revealed her true character in a way that no amount of legal maneuvering could undo. When the hearing resumed, Rebecca presented one final piece of evidence that she had been saving for maximum impact. A letter that Nalani had written to me just 3 years earlier, when Marcus was 21 and his company was beginning to show signs of real success. In that letter, Nalani had explicitly stated that she was glad Marcus didn't know about her, because it allowed her to start fresh with new relationships without the baggage of having an adult son. She had written that she hoped he would continue to be successful because maybe someday it would be worth the hassle of having a relationship with him. The words hung in the air like a physical presence, impossible to ignore or explain away. Even Nalani's lawyers looked defeated as Rebecca finished reading. "Your Honor," Rebecca said, "this is not a case about a mother seeking to reconnect with a beloved child. This is a case about a woman attempting to profit from the success of a son she discarded and ignored for 24 years. The evidence of her abandonment and exploitation is overwhelming, and her recent claims of maternal love are contradicted by decades of her own documented statements. The judge took less than 10 minutes to reach his decision. After reviewing the extensive documentation presented by both parties, he said, "I find that the plaintiff has no credible claim to financial support from the defendant. The evidence clearly shows a pattern of abandonment and manipulation that spans more than 2 decades. Moreover, the plaintiff's own written statements contradict her current claims of maternal affection and concern." He looked directly at Nalani. "Ms. Holloway, you made a choice 24 years ago to relinquish the responsibilities of motherhood. You cannot now claim the benefits of that relationship while continuing to deny those same responsibilities." Then he turned to Marcus. "Mr. Holloway, you are under no legal or moral obligation to provide financial support to someone who contributed nothing to your upbringing and who has shown no genuine interest in your welfare throughout your life." The gavel came down with a finality that seemed to echo through my entire body. It was over. After 24 years of carrying the burden of Nalani's abandonment, after 6 weeks of legal threats and emotional manipulation, it was finally over. But as we gathered our things to leave, Nalani wasn't finished. She approached Marcus one last time, her face twisted with anger and desperation. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice low and vicious. "You think you're better than me, but you're nothing without the money I helped you get by leaving you with her. You owe me everything, and someday you'll realize that." Marcus looked at her with something that might have been pity. "I don't owe you anything," he said quietly. "And I never want to see you again." As we walked out of the courthouse together, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of Nalani's potential return, the fear of losing Marcus to her manipulation, the burden of keeping her secrets, all of it was gone. But the real victory wasn't the judge's decision or the legal vindication. The real victory was watching Marcus walk away from his biological mother without a second glance, his arm linked with mine, choosing the family that had chosen him over the family that had abandoned him. We had won more than a court case. We had won our freedom. 5 months have passed since that November morning in the courthouse, and I'm sitting on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the sun set over the city skyline. The apartment is bigger than my old one, brighter, with a view that stretches for miles. Marcus insisted on moving me here after the court case was settled, saying he couldn't bear the thought of me spending another winter in that drafty old building where I'd raised him. I resisted at first. That small apartment had been our home for 24 years, the place where Marcus had taken his first steps, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, where we'd built our life together one day at a time. But Marcus was right. It was time for a new beginning. The apartment came with something I never expected to have again: peace of mind. For the first time since that rainy October night in 1999, I don't wake up wondering if today will be the day Nalani reappears to disrupt our lives. The legal judgment was final and comprehensive, establishing not only that she had no financial claims against Marcus, but also that any future contact would constitute harassment. Marcus visits every Sunday, just like he always has, but now our dinners have a different quality. The shadow that had hung over us for so long, the unspoken fear that someday his real mother might return to claim him, is gone. We can talk about the future without wondering if we'll have one together. We can make plans without the constant underlying anxiety that everything we'd built could be destroyed by a single phone call. Today is special, though. Today marks exactly 25 years since Marcus came into my life, and he's bringing someone for me to meet. Her name is Sarah. She's a teacher at an elementary school downtown, and from the way Marcus talks about her, I can tell she's going to be important to both of us. I've been nervous about meeting her all week, which is ridiculous at my age. But there's something about introducing the woman who might become Marcus's wife to the woman who raised him that feels momentous, like the final piece of our family puzzle clicking into place. The intercom buzzes at exactly 6 o'clock, because Marcus has been punctual his entire life. "Gamma, we're here," his voice comes through the speaker, warm with excitement. When I open the door, I see Marcus standing beside a woman with kind eyes and dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She's pretty in an understated way, but what strikes me most is how comfortable she looks standing next to him, like they fit together naturally. "Gamma, this is Sarah," Marcus says, and I can hear the pride in his voice. "Sarah, this is my grandmother, Adela, but everyone calls her Gamma." Sarah steps forward and takes my hand, her grip firm and warm. "Mrs. Holloway, I've heard so much about you. Marcus talks about you constantly. I feel like I know you already." "Call me Gamma," I say automatically, because that's what I've been called for 25 years now, and it's who I am. "And I hope everything he's told you has been reasonably flattering." Sarah laughs, a genuine sound that makes me like her immediately. "Only the most wonderful things. He says you're the strongest woman he's ever known." As we settle into my living room, I find myself studying Sarah the way I imagine mothers have always studied their sons' girlfriends. She's attentive, but not obsequious, asking questions about my life and interests without making it feel like an interview. When Marcus tells a story about his childhood, she listens with genuine interest, laughing at the funny parts and looking properly impressed at his accomplishments. But what wins me over completely is the way she looks at him when he's not paying attention. There's love there, yes, but also respect and admiration and something deeper. The kind of caring that can sustain a relationship through difficulties and disappointments, and all the ordinary challenges of building a life together. Over dinner, Sarah tells me about her work at the school, about the challenges and rewards of teaching second grade. She talks about her students with the same kind of protective affection I recognize from my own feelings about Marcus, and I realize she understands what it means to care for children who aren't biologically your own. "Marcus tells me you raised him from the time he was a baby," she says as we're finishing our meal. "That must have been incredibly difficult, starting over with a child when you were already in your 40s. "It was the best thing that ever happened to me," I say, and I mean it completely. I didn't know it at the time. I was terrified and overwhelmed and had no idea what I was doing. But Marcus gave my life purpose and meaning in a way I never expected. Sarah nods thoughtfully. "I can see that. You can see how much you love each other just by watching you together." After dinner, Marcus helps me clear the table while Sarah admires the photos I have displayed throughout the apartment. Pictures of Marcus at every stage of his life, from that first professional photo I had taken when he was 6 months old to his college graduation to the newspaper article about his company's success. "Gamma," Marcus says quietly as we're loading the dishwasher. "What do you think of her?" I look through the kitchen doorway at Sarah, who is examining a photo of Marcus's 8th birthday party with a gentle smile on her face. "I think she's exactly what you need," I say. "Someone who sees who you really are and loves you for it." Marcus's face lights up. "I was hoping you'd say that, because—" He reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out a small velvet box. "I'm going to ask her to marry me." The ring is beautiful, a simple solitaire that manages to be both elegant and unpretentious, exactly the kind of ring Sarah would choose for herself. But more than the ring, it's the look on Marcus's face that takes my breath away. Pure joy, uncomplicated by doubt or fear or any of the shadows that have followed us for so many years. "When?" I ask. "Next week." I've planned a whole evening, dinner at the restaurant where we had our first date, then a walk through the park where we first said we loved each other. Marcus's eyes are bright with excitement and nervousness. I wanted to show you the ring first, though. I wanted your blessing. My blessing. As if I have any authority to grant or withhold approval for the choices he makes in his life. But I understand what he's really asking. He wants to know that I'm happy for him, that I support his choice, that I welcome Sarah into our small family. You have it, I say, reaching up to touch his cheek the way I used to when he was small. You have all my love and all my blessings, sweetheart. She's a lucky woman, and I think you're pretty lucky too. When we rejoin Sarah in the living room, she's looking at a photo from Marcus's high school graduation, one of my favorites, where he's wearing his cap and gown and grinning at the camera with the kind of pure happiness that only comes from achieving something you've worked hard for. He was valedictorian, I tell her proudly. I know, Sarah says. He's still the smartest person I've ever met, but more than that, he's the kindest. Do you know he volunteers at the Children's Hospital every month, reading to kids who are going through long-term treatment? I didn't know that, and the surprise must show on my face because Marcus looks embarrassed. It's nothing special, Gamma. Just something I started doing a couple of years ago. But it is special, and it tells me something important about the man I raised. Despite everything he went through, the abandonment, the financial struggles, the uncertainty about his identity and worth, he grew up to be someone who gives back, who cares about children who are facing their own difficulties. As the evening winds down, Sarah helps me with the last of the cleaning up while Marcus steps onto the balcony to take a business call. It gives us a few minutes alone, and I find myself wanting to say something to her, though I'm not quite sure what. Sarah, I begin, then pause, trying to find the right words. Marcus hasn't had an easy life. His mother, well, she wasn't able to be the parent he needed. There are things about his childhood, his family situation, that were complicated and sometimes painful. Sarah nods seriously. He's told me about that, about how his mother left him with you when he was a baby, and how she tried to come back into his life recently for financial reasons. He told you about the court case? Everything, Sarah says. He doesn't keep secrets from me, and I appreciate that. I know you protected him from a lot of pain over the years, and I want you to know that I'll never let anyone hurt him if I can help it. The fierceness in her voice reminds me of myself 25 years ago, standing in my small apartment with a baby I was determined to protect from the world that had already failed him once. I'm glad, I say simply. He deserves someone who will fight for him. As they're getting ready to leave, Marcus gives me one of his bear hugs, the kind that still make me feel like the most important person in his world. Thank you, Gamma, he says quietly. For everything, for raising me, for protecting me, for loving me even when it was hard. I know I've never said it enough, but I wouldn't be who I am today without you. You don't need to thank me for loving you, I tell him. That was never a sacrifice. That was a privilege. After they leave, I sit on my balcony in the gathering darkness, thinking about how different my life is now from what I expected it would be at 70 years old. I thought I would be alone by now, living quietly on my pension, visiting my husband's grave on Sundays, and reading romance novels to pass the time. Instead, I have a grandson who calls me every day, who brings me into his business decisions, who values my opinion and seeks my advice. I have a future daughter-in-law who treats me with genuine affection and respect. I have the prospect of great-grandchildren someday, of birthday parties and holiday celebrations, and all the ongoing joy of watching a family grow and evolve. Most importantly, I have peace. The kind of deep, settled peace that comes from knowing that the battle is over and you've won. Not just the legal battle with Nalani, but the longer, more difficult battle to build something good and lasting and true from the wreckage of abandonment and betrayal. Tomorrow is Monday, and Marcus will call me in the morning like he does every day to check in, to tell me about his weekend, to make sure I'm feeling well and that I have everything I need. Sarah will probably be with him, and maybe she'll take the phone to say hello and ask about my plans for the week. Next Sunday, they'll come for dinner again, and maybe Marcus will have news about Sarah's answer to his proposal. I'm not worried about what she'll say. I saw the way she looked at him tonight, the way she lit up when he talked about their future together. In a few years, there might be a wedding to plan, grandchildren to spoil, a house in the suburbs where Sunday dinners happen around a bigger table with more voices and more laughter. But for now, it's enough to sit here in the quiet of my new apartment, surrounded by 25 years of photographs and memories, knowing that the family we built together, the one that chose love over blood, commitment over convenience, sacrifice over selfishness, is stronger than anything that tried to destroy it. The phone rings, interrupting my thoughts. For just a moment, old habits make my heart race, the way it used to when unexpected calls could mean crisis or loss or unwelcome surprises. But when I answer, it's Marcus's voice, warm and excited and happy. Gamma, I know we just left, but I had to call. Sarah said yes. We're engaged. Behind him, I can hear Sarah laughing, probably embarrassed by his enthusiasm, but charmed by it too. I'm so happy for you both, I say, and I mean it with every fiber of my being. When's the wedding? We're thinking next fall. Sarah wants to finish out the school year, and I want to make sure we plan something really special. Will you help us? Will I help them plan their wedding? Will I be part of this new chapter, this expansion of our small family into something bigger and richer and more complete? I would love to, I say. And as I hang up the phone, I realize that this is what happiness looks like. Not the dramatic, overwhelming joy of movies and romance novels, but the quiet, deep satisfaction of knowing that everyone you love is exactly where they belong. 25 years ago, a young woman left her baby on my doorstep and walked away, thinking she was dumping a burden she couldn't handle. What she actually gave me was the greatest gift of my life. The chance to love someone completely, to matter to someone absolutely, to build something lasting and beautiful and true. I kept my promise to that abandoned baby. I raised him with love and dedication and sacrifice, and I protected him from the knowledge of how easily he could have been thrown away. Now he's protecting me in return, making sure I'm comfortable and secure, including me in his plans for the future. Treating me not like a burden from his past, but like the foundation of everything good in his life. Some stories end with revenge, others end with justice. But the best stories, the ones that matter most, end with love winning over abandonment, commitment triumphing over betrayal, and families that choose each other proving stronger than families that are simply born. This is our love story, Marcus's and mine, and it's far from over. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.